Hello, New Paltz. Welcome to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. I'm here every Wednesday at 9 a.m. talking movies, new reviews, recommendations, lists. I just love movies, and that's what I do here. On today's show, I'm going to review new releases Lee Cronin's The Mummy and Normal, talk a little bit about recent Bob Odenkirk action movies, and close out the show with my 3 throwback recommendations for this week. I'll be right back, but first here's some movie music, starting with the James Bond theme by the City of Prague Philharmonic Orchestra. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Kicking off the show today, I'm going to review the new horror film from director Lee Cronin, The Mummy. Directed by Lee Cronin, the young daughter of a journalist, played by Jack Rayner, disappears into the desert without a trace. 8 years later, the broken family is shocked when she is returned to them, as what should be a joyful reunion turns into a living nightmare. This is one I've heard about over the last few months. I saw the trailer for the first time a couple weeks ago. Didn't look like it would be my thing, really. I already don't get too excited about horror movies, and then the horror imagery in the trailer didn't interest me too much. The only other film I've seen from Lee Cronin is Evil Dead Rise, which I'm not a big fan of, and unfortunately I didn't care for The Mummy either. I found it to be a really messy and unengaging story with a lot of horror elements I didn't enjoy. I think this story has a few areas where I got a little more interested in them than the overall film. There's the missing person element and this family losing their child under mysterious circumstances, and then years go by and the trail has gone cold. You see the family at a later point in life and how they've dealt with this, only for their daughter to return home surprisingly. The idea of someone going missing and coming back, and then the mystery of what happened while they were gone, where did they go, and then the family drama of it and dealing with grief. When you had this set up earlier in the movie with this family, it had my attention and I was interested to see this mystery unfold. And then when the daughter comes back and returns home is where the movie starts to have a lot of problems for me. As the story moves from here, every aspect of this script becomes shallow and uninteresting to me. The way this family drama progresses after the daughter comes back and the conflict there was an attempt at having these themes of family and loss, and I think Jack Rayner and Leia Costa as the mother do a decent job here, but the characters in conflict become half-baked and never fully have the effectiveness of the family drama. There's other elements of blame and resentment in there, conflicts that come up that also feel like they come and go out of nowhere. There's not enough time given to fleshing this out, so when it comes up here and there, it's hard to care much about it. As for the horror here, I think there is some solid direction and suspense in some of these sequences. There's one kind of chase scene in the middle of the movie that I thought was pretty cool, but a lot of this horror is really not my thing, and I found it nasty in a way I don't find entertaining. There's some body horror elements with this gross imagery and throw up that I found disgusting and not something I found scary or clever, just really something I don't like in horror movies. This horror genre of this possession thing of an evil spirit is also really not my thing. I just don't find the whole backstory and what the horror leads to very entertaining. The way she turns into this monster as she's possessed by this spirit, and the sequences of her attacks and powers, it was all pretty generic in my opinion and didn't make me feel much thrills or suspense from it. And again, with the story, it feels very unbalanced. The family drama doesn't get its development, the investigation elements with the police and May Calamawe's character in Egypt, and how all that ties into the backstory isn't very grabbing, and the mystery and how this progresses with the police and the family side with the horror, it all feels very shallow, and tries to have a lot going on in the story, but it also has very little to offer as well. I feel like if the story was better, maybe if it had better conflict with this family drama, I would have gotten more out of this one, because I'm definitely not a big fan of this genre of horror, and a lot of what it goes for here. The possession and body horror doesn't interest me at all. There is the missing person and mystery element that I found slightly more compelling, but even then it doesn't have enough to it. The characters and family are all really dull and kind of irritating at points. I think even beyond a preference level for me, I think this is a pretty poorly done script that ended up feeling really long. And Evil Dead Rise from Lee Cronin had a few similar issues, where it was in this type of horror I don't find too appealing, and it was quite dull with gross moments without having anything unique to offer. I think the Sam Raimi Evil Dead films appeal to me much more because there is the wackiness and comedy that Sam Raimi brings in that adds a lot of fun and personality to it. So even the blood and nastier stuff has more energy and fun to it. But when the story is this dull and unbalanced and it's unpleasant for me to watch, I can't recommend this one. If you're a fan of this kind of horror, you might like it, but I got very little out of this. I give The Mummy a 48 out of 100. I'll be right back on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale, but first here's some more movie music, starting with The Book of Evil by Joseph LaDuca from the Evil Dead 2 score. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Next up today, I'm going to review the new action movie starring Bob Odenkirk, Normal. Directed by Ben Wheatley, centers on a temporary small-town sheriff who uncovers dark mysteries after a local bank robbery. I've been looking forward to this movie for months now. I haven't seen much marketing for it, but I was looking into what movies were coming out for this semester of shows, and a Bob Odenkirk action movie where he plays a small-town sheriff sold me. Ever since Nobody, any action role this guy does is gonna interest me, and I actually hadn't seen the full trailer for this until a few weeks ago when it played in theaters. It looked wild and fun, definitely looked like something I would enjoy, and it's not without its flaws, but I had a great time with this movie. So this was a movie that started off pretty solid to me, but also a bit on the slower and more conventional side. It's this idea of Odenkirk's character being basically this substitute sheriff, where he goes to small towns to fill in for a few weeks while they're looking for a new sheriff, and this brings him to Normal, Minnesota. It's a small, quiet town with friendly faces that he's just going to try to keep happy, settle these little disputes that come up in a small town, meet all the people that make up this little community where things seem pretty normal. There's some weirder characters, some eccentricity. You got Henry Winkler as the mayor that brings his personality, and there's parts of the town that seem a little strange for a small place like this, but overall things are alright, and Odenkirk's character is just trying to keep things the same, and this part of the movie for me was okay, but didn't necessarily pull me in fully. I can be down for this kind of setup with this small town with a secret, and this outsider coming in and realizing that something is a little off, but it does move quite slow as it's setting up some of these details with the characters and what Odenkirk's character is discovering throughout and some of the people he meets. And I think part of the problem with this setup period of the movie is that the characters and the building of what's really going on in this town and what darker secrets are at play isn't the most compelling. When it comes to the character here and some of the elements of this character arc they're trying to give him and these conversations he has with some of the side characters in this town, it doesn't incorporate this backstory of the character and what he's going through in his personal life into the script to make you really feel the impact of what his character is going through. We'll talk about Nobody in a bit, but to make the comparison, that movie has this family drama and strange character exploration with Odenkirk's character that weaves into the action story in a way that adds some emotion. This movie makes similar attempts to have some more human elements among the craziness of this action, but it doesn't pull this off as effectively to make the character have quite the same amount of depth. And I would say the same thing goes for the side characters of this film as well. There's a few characters in this film that are introduced at the beginning, and there seems to be a hint at there being more to them and where they're going to tie into the story, and then they don't get much development past their initial introductions, both within this crime story and with their relationship to Odenkirk's character. So when they do come back up and where they tie into the story, by the time you get to where this was all going with them and some of these twists, it doesn't really have the payoff, and these characters end up feeling very bland, where you can see some of the potential of where they were going with them at tying into this arc for Odenkirk's character with the wild conspiracy of this town as well, and where this action goes. And I do think the idea of what they were doing with this lead character and having a more meaningful drama within this sillier action movie had some potential as well, but the script doesn't quite give enough depth to these throughout the setup and the story to really make you care. And overall, the setup of this movie is slow, especially with the story of what's going on in this town and these characters not being the most grabbing. Even as these sort of stories needing this setup period to meet the town and everything, it was a bit dull. Some of the humor and side characters got annoying for me as well, and I was worried this movie would be a disappointment. But then you really get into the action and what the trailer promised that I got really excited about, and I started to have so much fun with this movie very quickly. As the story and setup goes along in this town, you eventually get to this major event in the story where everything changes, and this movie becomes a wonderfully silly and brutal action movie that has the mix of violence and comedy of Nobody that I love so much. Maybe the whole conspiracy with this town and the mystery there didn't have the most engagement to it, maybe it lacks some depth in the story and characters, but when you get to this stretch of the movie where the action really takes off and it becomes this showdown, what having this very superficially ordinary and wholesome town setting does to have so much fun with the fights and kills, once you get there, it really makes up for a lot of some of the drawbacks of this script. And when it comes to that earlier part of the film, something it does do very well is establish these details in the town that will come back into play in terms of the fights. You see some of these quirky elements in the parts of this town that seem a little off, so many of these things that would come back later in really clever ways. You see these details that make it very obvious that are going to come back later to be used as a weapon, but when you get to when they come back and play into and get their moment, it delivers on it. There are a lot of guns in this movie, but you also have many of these little things that get used as weapons that make these kills unique. It feels like the character using this small town environment to survive and win these fights. And there's some brutal moments that tie these in that have humor, but doesn't pull punches with the gore. The tonal balance there was so enjoyable. Just some dark comedy as well that brings some more absurdity with how wild things get, with who attacks him and some of the gags in these sequences. And when it comes to Odenkirk as an action star, again, we'll talk more about his action career in a bit, but it's amazing how he pulls this off in these movies. With Nobody and now this, he's able to pull off these action roles where he has to be a fighter that can take guys out, but he has this very normal guy nature to him that doesn't seem very intimidating, but once he starts fighting, it's believable and awesome. And again, with Odenkirk's personality and comedy background and the sense of humor these movies have, he's fun in this without taking away from the idea that he can handle himself in these fights. The choreography of these fights, with using the environments and having these hits and use of these weapons, feels so brutal. There's a great knife fight later in the movie where the camera work and stunt work is really electric. And where it goes in the end with these criminal characters and how it closes out, the comedy in this and going even further into the absurdity, worked so well for me. The movie gets ridiculous, but it's what I wanted it to be. This setup is a bit dull, the script doesn't tie in the side characters to have much depth with the story, but once you get to this amazing stretch of action and comedy, bringing together this quirky small town setting with some violent and exciting action, the balance of this is exactly what I wanted from this movie. It has so much fun with the idea once you really get to the explosiveness, and it became one of the most fun theater experiences of the year for me so far. If you're interested in this movie as a small town mystery, the story there is a little bland and shallow, but if you're down for more Bob Odenkirk action with something like Nobody and blending action and comedy with these clever fights with thrilling stunt work, I think you will have a great time with this movie. This is my kind of thing. I love this genre. If you're not a fan of action, I think you can skip this one, but I enjoyed this a lot. I give Normal a 79 out of 100. I'll be right back on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale, but first here's some more movie music, starting with Bank Robbery by Harry Gregson Williams and Ryder McNair from the Normal score. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Next up today, I wanted to talk about a few recent Bob Odenkirk movies, specifically his recent action movies of Nobody and Nobody 2, and now his new movie Normal. So the first thing I saw Bob Odenkirk in was Breaking Bad as the character Saul Goodman. He had a background in comedy before then, and I haven't really seen any of his comedy shows. He had Mr. Show with David Cross that I've heard of, but never really seen any clips or episodes from, and I really enjoyed him in Breaking Bad. Saul is a fun character that adds personality to that show and works really well in the plot as Walter White's lawyer that is so involved in the criminal underworld and these connections he has. The sleazy lawyer persona Odenkirk brought was great, and the sarcasm and physical acting he brought to this character makes him so memorable and funny. But then you get to Better Call Saul as a spin-off of Breaking Bad, and Odenkirk's abilities as a dramatic actor are at another level here. I love Breaking Bad, and I got so hooked for the first time I watched it, and it's remained one of my favorite TV shows of all time. But it took me a little bit to start Better Call Saul after finishing Breaking Bad. I just wasn't into it at the time. I heard it was really good, but I didn't have a big rush to start it. And then I did. I got caught up around when Season 5 ended, and the show overall is amazing and is perhaps better than Breaking Bad, and Odenkirk's acting as not Saul Goodman this time, but as Jimmy McGill, the complicated man before he was Saul Goodman, and you see the events that led him to be Saul and become this criminal. The complexity Odenkirk shows with the incredible writing of this man that is a decent guy, but has flaws that lead him to do reckless things, and how he tries to justify it. This character becomes one of the most deep of the world of Breaking Bad, and Odenkirk playing all that goes into him and bringing emotion to a character that seemed to only exist as comic relief. The writing of these shows is brilliant and goes a long way as well, but how Odenkirk shows all these emotions and how the character feels and acts involving these events and relationships in his life on his fall to Saul Goodman is outstanding. And then in about 2020, I saw that Nobody was coming out, and that Bob Odenkirk would be starring in an action movie that seemed like a John Wick type of story of this retired assassin coming out of retirement on a revenge mission, and I wasn't sure about Bob Odenkirk as an action star. I wouldn't think of him as someone that could pull off this intimidation and playing someone that you do not want to mess with, but it definitely seemed like my type of movie, and Odenkirk got in great shape for this movie and did a ton of training, so I was really excited for this one. And now Bob Odenkirk has done 3 recent action movies total: Nobody, Nobody 2, and Normal, so I'll go through them here and share my ranking. I think in last of these 3 is going to be Nobody 2. This one just came out last year. I was really looking forward to this. The idea of this one was Hutch and his family going on vacation and him getting wrapped up in this criminal conspiracy where he has to take out these criminals. I still had fun with this movie. It doesn't work as well as the first, but it gives you more of that film and what you want from it in terms of the mix of action and comedy. This water park setting and all the vacation stuff works into the action really well. The fight at the arcade and on the boat work in these very seemingly normal and safe environments for him to find weapons in all of them. He uses a claw from a claw machine and stuff like that as a weapon. I think the action there is a lot of fun and has more awesome camera work and choreography. And the final showdown at the water park with doing the sort of Home Alone concept again, with setting traps, is so entertaining. The family drama and characters aren't as strong here. Connie Nielsen as his wife and the kids perhaps have more screen time this time, but they don't work quite as well in terms of integrating into this drama, and the overall conspiracy is extremely forgettable as well. It wasn't the greatest in the first film either, but here it slipped my mind even quicker. The main thing with these movies is the action and comedy with Bob Odenkirk in the lead, and it does nail that, but it's a worse story that isn't as cohesive as the first film, but it's more from this concept and characters that I still really enjoyed. At number 2, I'm going to go with the new film Normal. Like I said in my review, this one is a lot of fun. It builds slow, the story isn't the most engaging, and where it integrates some of these characters with some of the character arcs and with the crime story is pretty shallow, but once you get the action, it delivers what you would want from it. Me as a fan of Nobody was excited for more Bob Odenkirk action, and this movie delivered. The fights and bringing in this small town environment to have Odenkirk's character take out a bunch of this town hunting him. The setups at the beginning with all these things he's going to use as weapons as they come back up later. The stunt performances and choreography is excellent. Odenkirk kills this role. If you're a fan of Nobody, this is one you gotta watch. It gives you more of what's great about that film. The story and characters don't work as well, but it's really solid and I had a great time with it. But my favorite of Bob Odenkirk's recent action movies is going to be the first Nobody. This one has the best story of these, of this guy Hutch, who's a retired assassin and is now a family man, who is in a bit of a rut. His routine is feeling mundane, and his relationship with his wife has grown distant. He doesn't have the respect of some people in his life, and then he takes an opportunity to beat these guys up on a bus that are causing trouble, and ends up becoming a target of a network of criminals, and he has to handle these people coming after him. The mix of this family and character drama with the John Wick type of action and story, and with some comedy, is tremendously balanced here. The bus fight is the best of these movies. It's brutal and messy, but there's still style in the camera work and choreography. The finale with the Home Alone traps and getting Christopher Lloyd as his father joining the fight is so much fun. You have that sort of John Wick vibe with some of the world building and this network of people who know who he is and what's going on. And the family drama does work in this movie in a bit of a strange way, but you do get really invested in the characters. This movie has awesome fights, a solid story, and it's darkly funny. This is one of the most rewatchable action movies for me. It's so easy to put this on and have fun with it. Odenkirk totally sells the action and brings intimidation and fun to this character. I would love more Bob Odenkirk action movies at this point. They're really my thing and movies I enjoy. They've all been at least solid so far for me, but the first Nobody is still the best in my opinion. I'll be right back on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale, but first here's some more movie music, starting with We Reap What We Sow by David Buckley from the Nobody score. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Closing out the show today, I'm going to give you my 3 throwback recommendations for this week. Every week I like to take 3 movies I like to recommend and talk about them a little bit here. My first throwback recommendation for this week is 2014's Kingsman: The Secret Service. Directed by Matthew Vaughn, a spy organization recruits a promising street kid, played by Taron Egerton, into the agency's training program, while a global threat emerges from a twisted tech genius, played by Samuel L. Jackson. This is another really cool blending of action and comedy. There's this world building of this spy world with the Kingsmen and these cartoonier elements, with the gadgets and training. You follow Taron Egerton's character going through the training as this threat from Samuel L. Jackson's character is emerging, and he's under the mentorship of Colin Firth's character. The characters are enjoyable with this mentor relationship and how they bring their sense of humor in the action. It incorporates the sillier elements with the gadgets and some very wild visuals and camera work. There's a fight in a church that is brutal and has such high energy. The gun-fu type fights with some other action like some skydiving, some underwater stuff. There's different kinds of action throughout that are all impressive and exciting. The plot here with Samuel L. Jackson's villain character is wild and silly, but you still have the spy and end-of-the-world element with the threat it presents and the characters racing to stop it. This movie has high energy and silliness, but it's also brutal with the action. The characters have some depth to them. This is a fun world. There is a sequel and a prequel that I don't think are as good as this one, but both are still worth watching as well if you like the first one and this world. My second throwback recommendation for this week is 2018's Game Night. Directed by John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein, A group of friends who meet regularly for game night finds themselves entangled in a real-life mystery when the shady brother of one of them is seemingly kidnapped by dangerous gangsters. This is a really enjoyable comedy from a few years ago with a great ensemble cast, but mainly stars Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams as this couple hosting game night when things start to get wild and they think this is just a game, but there are potentially real elements at play with this criminal plot. It's such a good concept for a comedy. The two leads are so enjoyable, and I love both of their comedic performances. Rachel McAdams was so good this year in Send Help with her charm and comedy, and she brings that to this movie as well. And I love Jason Bateman's dry humor and straight man energy. This movie is full of funny bits and mixing in some danger as well. You're trying to figure this out. The script and direction are so clever and pull all these genres together really well. It's a great comedy. My third throwback recommendation for this week is 2004's Dodgeball, A True Underdog Story. Directed by Ross and Marshall Thurber, a group of misfits enter a Las Vegas dodgeball tournament in order to save their cherished local gym from the onslaught of a corporate health fitness chain. I can really enjoy a good sports comedy. Dodgeball is a good one. Vince Vaughn is in the lead as the owner of this gym, where he has to face off with his team against Ben Stiller as the owner of this corporate gym. I really enjoy the cast here. The ensemble brings personality and some fun sports moments. The training for this tournament where they have to save this charming little gym and are taking this very seriously for what the gym means to them. Vince Vaughn is great as this more straight man role, with still some personality and likability. Ben Stiller is really funny here as this over-the-top corporate gym guy. The competition of this and the dodgeball sequences are actually exciting and work in the humor and absurdity really well. This is a really rewatchable comedy that has the sports and the over-the-top humor, but Vince Vaughn keeps it more down to earth at points as well. It's a really well-balanced comedy. So this week, if you want an awesome spy comedy with cool characters, watch Kingsman: The Secret Service. If you want a clever comedy with a great ensemble cast, watch Game Night. And if you want a charming sports comedy, watch Dodgeball, A True Underdog Story. I'll be right back to close out the show, but first here's some more movie music, starting with Clock Tower Part 1 by Alan Silvestri from the Back to the Future score. That's going to be it for me this week on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. I'll be back next week with a review of Michael and some more movie talk. You can listen to past episodes of the show on YouTube, and be sure to follow my Instagram for updates and more content. Both of those are Not Quite My Tempo with Chris. New episodes will be up on YouTube after they air on WFNP Rosendale, so this episode will be up very shortly, and I will be back next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Have a good week.